I want to welcome the public to the Cincinnati School Board Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee. And before we get started, we'll introduce from right to left the wonderful people that are at the table.
Thank you. Mike Morosky, board member.
Eve Bolton, board member.
Brandon Craig, board member.
Susan Bunty, assistant superintendent.
Michael Gustin, director of business technology.
Connie Solano, interim chief operating officer.
And virtually we have with us
Good morning, everyone. It's Jen Wagner. I'm the treasurer.
our treasurer. This is the chance we all waited for. What's everybody's budget requests right now? We approve all of them. There you go. So, okay, and we have our treasurer with us, Jen Wagner. So we'll get started, and we'll begin. We're going to try to do the agenda in order as best we can today. And first we have Kevin Ashley, Director of Financial Reporting, who will be presenting, and I think some other folks are presenting too within these within this topic. Financial reports, our monthly efforts.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to be here with you today. So yeah, I'll kick it off and then I'll pass it on once I'm done with my part. So I'm going to go through the monthly financial graphs first. And this is kind of a financial overview we started including a couple months ago, just to kind of give a quick summary of what's included and where things are right now. The key takeaway, which we always try to highlight, is that finances are on track and there aren't any significant unexpected issues. There's always fluctuations based on timing of tax advances, tax revenue, state foundation revenue, and all of those things. But generally, we can account for those, and we recognize what those differences are. So I'll go on to the next slide. One more. This is our cash balance at the end of February. If you recall, last month we mentioned there was a slight delay in tax advances from Hamilton County property tax advances, and so those came in like gangbusters in February. So that's one reason our cash balance is at $227 for the general fund at the end of February. Go on to the next slide. This is a revenue comparison, fiscal year to date, July through February. One thing we did add to this slide is just to kind of give some context of what the light blue for the prior 2 years represents what our pass-through, ODE pass-through funding deductions were. So just to give, because obviously we're not having those deductions this year. And so we wanted to kind of, so that the dark blue lines kind of represent what that would have looked like in the prior 2 fiscal years. Next slide, please. This one kind of breaks it down a little bit further in terms of sources. You'll see the bottom, the blue category is taxes. On the far right is our budget for this year. Going to the left, that's the current fiscal year. We've received most of our property tax revenue at this point. The February settlement should be coming in. They call it February settlement. It doesn't always come in February, so it'll be coming this month. And that will pretty much be the end of our taxes through June. Then we start getting tax advances on the next year in July. Next slide, please. So this is on the expenditure side. Again, the green is our working budget, which includes the carryover encumbrances. If you recall at the beginning, our appropriations were 609, and the working budget includes those carryover encumbrances. Again, I think we did have this last month. I know we touched on this last month, the blue being those pass-through funding deductions, just to kind of show that, what that would have looked like otherwise. Next slide. This is where we're just computing what the unallocated budget at this point. So when we look at our outstanding encumbrances. And we look at the remaining budget for salaries and benefits and what we had budgeted for transfers, primarily to school-wide pool. That leaves about 6.8% of the budget that at this point is either non-encumbered or otherwise not spoken for. I think given we weren't doing that calculation specifically at this point last fiscal year, but I think that is on target with where we would expect that to be at this point. Next slide. So just a quick overview of school-wide pool expenditures on the next slide. You can see last year's expenditures were 138 million versus 148, so about 10 million increase. The primary driver of that is our allocations for school-wide pool were a little bit more this year, as well as collective bargaining increases for salary and benefits are the primary drivers of that. Next slide. Again, we did this unallocated budget, and you can see it's only about 1% because most of that money is already set aside for salary and benefits. Next slide. One more, please. Preschool. So tuition assistance calculation based on the student eligibility, we compute this to allocate back to the levy funds related to the preschool. For February, that calculated out to $495,000. Fiscal year to date, $3.5 million. But that's based on 868 students that preschool determined were eligible for that assistance. One of the things we did talk about last month was how this related back to the last 3 years, and we did look back to February of 20, which was just before the pandemic, and it was a little bit lower. There's some timing. We'll continue to look at this and evaluate it as we go, but there is an uptick from even 2 years ago of students that are receiving assistance through this. Next slide, please. And this is basically a financial statement or a review of the preschool expansion. As you can see, the budget is to get about 15.9 in tax revenues. And then you can see the offsetting budgets there for tuition assistance, payments to United Way, et cetera. The only kind of anomaly on here, and I highlighted it with the up mark there, that last year at this time, we had not received as the same amount of tax advance at this point, but going into March, that number will even out. And it should be very similar to last year as well. And I think that's all I have for my presentation. Unless anybody has any questions.
Does members have any questions? I only have one, and I'm going to need to be schooled on this, I think, as we are changing the school-wide pooling. I'd be very interested into some tutoring, if you would, as to how we're going to be able to have the oversight, because not having that school-wide pooling should allow us to have greater accountability for the dollars for the specific whatever. And I would like to start to see whether it's charts or some some tutelage. I want to be able to do what we did years ago, which is actually see the expenditures for particular items that I think would be helpful. I know we're going to miss some of the great discretion that the school-wide pooling allowed, especially at the site level. But now that we don't have it, I'm going to want to be able to follow that even in a monthly kind of way, perhaps. So if you guys can be looking as to how to get that done, that would be great. At least that would help me, and I think it would help everybody.
Certainly, we'll discuss that.
Thank you.
I would say also that the Title I allocations, those things will be tracked, more specifically to those schools. So
It would be great.
yeah, okay.
It's all part of the equity piece, I'll tell you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Kevin. And you have other cohorts and
Yes.
colleagues to intro, and
I'll let Taya introduce herself.
Ty's going to, okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Taya Greenbundy, and I'm the manager of the state and federal grants. So I will be sharing information with you regarding our state and federal grants. So if I could have the spreadsheet that lists all the grants. And so we are 53% through the grant period. So the grants are available for 15 months, and we are in the 8th month. So 53% of the grant period has expired. And so this is a listing of all the individual state and federal grants, and it is broken down into 3 sections. So there's the public grants, which we have 34 grants for public use, and then we have our grants, if you could scroll down just a little bit. So then we have our grants that are available for us to combat COVID, and we have 8 of those. And then we have 9 of the non-public grants. And so our monthly average spend is 36% for our public grants. And so if you could go to the graphs, please. And so this is a graph of the average year-to-date spend by month for the public grants. So the blue represents the 2021 school year, and then the green represents the current school year. So we have been trending slightly higher this year, and with February, it kind of levels out. But the thing to note is that we have like $4 million more this year than we did last year. So last year, we had approximately $70 million for the public grants. This year, we have approximately 74 as of the month of February. And the next slide, please. And so this is the ESSER grants, so the grants that are available to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID. And so the blue graphs represent the total. So they're available to us through 2024. The total amount is $327 million. Of that total amount, we have spent $104 million to date. And then the green graphs represent specifically what is applicable to fiscal year 22. So for fiscal year 22, we have $130 million budgeted, and of that $130 million, we have spent $83 million. Any questions on the state and federal grants?
Not yet. I will ask on the grants. How long, again, we ask on benefit of the public, how long do the ESSER dollars continue?
They will be through 2024, so they expire in session. So the first allocation that we received will expire this fiscal year, the second one in 2023, and then the final in 2024.
So we have this coming fiscal year with some ESSER money and also fiscal year 24.
Right, so we have all of the funding is available to us, and then it expires. One in 20, so each allocation expires at a different year end.
Great, thank you. Members? Good, thank you.
All right, thank you, and I will turn it over to Joseph.
All right, CRAs.
Good morning, good morning.
Yeah.
Name's Joseph Porter, a little too close to this. Accounting Operations Manager. I am filling in for the Assistant Treasurer, Kim Hughes, and I will be going over CRAs. I'm not sure if it was a handout or if it's on the presentation, but we have 7 new CRAs this month passing through, and they are a combination of commercial and residential rental spaces, apartments. For each agreement, it's unique this month. All of the terms are 15-year contracts. And the estimated revenue is $125,000 annually, and the total estimated revenue for the 15-year contract is $1.8 million. We've been in contact with Michael Banish and the city of Cincinnati as far as getting them to come down and do a presentation regarding the CRAs. But after speaking with Michael Banish, we were told that they're in discussions currently with the city manager to make some changes to the CRA process. And once he completes those meetings with the city manager, they would be able to come down and present the changes. That's all that I had for CRA. Do you happen to have any questions you'd like to ask?
I'll just make a comment. Thank you so much. I would just make a comment that I feel encouraged by hearing the conversation in the city manager's office with this current mayor and city council. I have a feeling things are going to start looking a little different for us, as they have for a lot of other folks in the community. So that's good news to me.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. I would only add at the neighborhood summit, of course, the mayor and the vice mayor were there meeting our incoming superintendent, but also was the interim city manager. And indeed, he attended the CPS session and spoke at length with our incoming superintendent as well, and heard the presentations, and is very much interested in reviving the partnership, to your point, Mr. Morosky, and I think that's great. As they revisit the CRA process, I'm sure that much of that has to not just be on their side, but it impacts all of us as well. So I'm encouraged that they're discussing it. I'm encouraged that they want to be with us a bit more on many of these things. It was really good that he heard Assistant Superintendent Murphy, as did Mrs. Wright, lead the panel of many of our partners and partnerships. And so we got a good feel for the cooperation that we have kind of outside the city or beyond, not geographically, but I think it was encouraged that we can do better together. So I think that'll be good. No other questions, comments? We good? All right, let's move on. I think Mr. Hoyne is here, and just as I mentioned, we're going to stay on the agenda order. I'm changing the order, but what do they say? I'll say something sexist. It's a prerogative of a woman to do so. And Mr. Hoyne is going to be particularly talking and bringing us up to date regarding what is item 4.2, which is the SORTA contract. And contract is in quotes.
Sure. And Ms. Solano, I was looking for Ms. Solano, and she's right to my right. So I think there was a question about the SORTA agreement. I provided a copy to the chair. I'm glad to provide copies of the SORTA contract to the committee or to anyone. The important notes on this, it hasn't really been renegotiated or examined in detail since 2017-18. Since that time, the only real moving part of the contract between SORTA and CPS has been an annual kind of cost statement about what the projected costs are for the year. It's an addendum to the contract, and that has been reviewed and agreed to every year until the 21-22 school year, in which there was no kind of agreement that was, or there was no agreement signed. There has been payments made to SORTA. I'm glad to answer any questions, but I share the recommendation that it would behoove both parties to look at the contract and update it to the current situation. Glad to answer any questions.
Ms. Solano, do you have any comments?
Yes, I did talk to SORTA's CEO, and he mentioned that I guess for their compliance, still need signature on the July 1, 2020-2021 addendum, and then also on the July 1 to June 30th, 21-22. He signed both of them. Mr. Haley signed both of them in September of 2021. So he said he has not received our signatures on those.
I think the board made a conscientious decision not to sign something with which we so grossly disagreed with, and what had happened to us in August of this past year And so this was the last year of that agreement, if I recall. We've just gotten through. We've been signing, and certainly we kept our end of the bargain of paying the amounts that were due us. I know we still are waiting for, if this is correct, Ms. Milano, still waiting for some additional information from Metro, some data, especially from previous years, as well as unique ridership.
So our attorney did submit records requests for us, and we just had another meeting today to be more specific on exactly what data I am going to need, because I think they sent us some things, but it wasn't enough for us to work with. So they're working on that now, and they are going to be providing hopefully more detailed information for me in the upcoming weeks.
Thank you. Members have any questions about the agreement or how we proceed? Mr. Morosky?
I'll just repeat what I said in our committee of the whole. I think it was committee of the whole the other day, that I too believe that, entering into this contract is a good idea, and we have to really to transport our kids. And I'm happy to hear that they're answering our questions. Looking forward to the last couple questions we have hanging out there. And hopefully with the work of the committee that meets right before this with the policy committee, looking at our neighborhood boundaries and, our school attendance areas and all that, it'll play well with our new transportation plan that you're leading on, Ms. Solano. So thank you.
Ms. Craig?
Yeah, and I think I'll echo a little bit of what Mike just said there, but I think it is important for us to have this contract and this situation kind of getting itself resolved, which I think is great, because it also is important for us to be able to make that next transition into our transportation thoughts and how do we look at going forward with it. And so as much as we can get as beneficial opportunity for our students to be able to get transported safely on time to the right locations as possible, it is important to use SORTA and Metro as part of that transportation plan. And so I think it's just good, Donnie, that we're making important steps to review also and look at the contract to make sure we don't have anything in there that doesn't reflect the current relationship that we're having.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I would only add maybe two things. One, we won't be able to enter into negotiations until we have our plan and our proposal and what we want, which this current administration's been working very, very hard on to get ready, because even the yellow bus contracts impact on the Metro. And we are proposing some different things than we've had, I think, before, for particularly our 7th and 8th graders. And we still have that troublesome issue regarding extra routes and what have you. But we can't get our kids, and never have been able to get our kids to school, our teenagers especially, without this relationship with the mass transit folks in our region. So after we have our new transportation policies, and after we have this great proposal that's going to be coming from the administration, which is a joint effort from the committee and the administration committee and community, then we can start those negotiations. And these negotiations might be conducted among people that negotiate, but these really are also going to be public negotiations as to what each group needs or thinks they need. These are not going to be necessarily just the experts talking to one another, because there's any number of 3 boards, 2 elected and 1 appointed, that will have something to say about what this looks like. And that might be part of that Cincinnati cooperation or commission cooperation, or SORTA, us all reaching some sort of compromise about, because we're making all kinds of adjustments, not just this year, but even in the plans. I think there's some real compromising efforts that we're making. I appreciate the administration's work on it. So yes, it's an agreement, not really a contract. We didn't sign it, but we are paying our due, and it would be important to have it in place before the next school year, obviously.
Very much, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Horn.
Thank you.
All right. Next is our budget update from our treasurer, Jen Wagner.
Good morning, everyone. So Rob, if you could pull my
Who is
PowerPoint up.
virtual?
Yes. Can you hear me? Rob?
And providing us music as well. She's a very talented woman.
No, that's
She
not
has a
me.
complete orchestra at her home.
No, that's not me. Rob?
Elevator waiting music. Are we having trouble? If we're having trouble, I can move on. Yep.
Yeah, Jen, we're not picking up your audio, so I wanted to make sure it was working on our end.
Okay.
Well, it was.
Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Jim will be doing a budget update and talking in terms of the new superintendent onboarding and also ESSER revisions. Tell me, Rob, if I need to move on. Up. Okay, we're going to move on again. Never say it's a short meeting because it won't be, and never say you're staying to the agenda because you won't. This is the things I've learned. Okay, transportation update. One of our featured guest stars at finance is Ms. Solano, working through one of our more difficult and challenging issues. And so, Solano, I'll allow you to get started.
For Robert to put it up. Rob, you have the presentation.
Rob's. There we go. Well, wrong. Super.
Next slide, please. So this, one before that, I apologize. So in our transportation, this is a transitional year for us. We fall under optimized capabilities in our strategic plan, and our goal is to get better. And that's why we have this collaborative effort with the board and transportation department and our stakeholders to make this happen for our babies. Next slide, please. So our vision is really to have transportation a seamless part of the enrollment process. We should be a given that students are going to be able to get transportation as quickly as possible, going to be able to get to school on time, picked up on time, dropped off at home on time. We want our families, our community we want to be a best-in-class service, and we want our customers to experience that, both internal and external. Next slide. So this is our transportation plan as we prepare for next year. And as you can see, we're moving right along. The check marks indicate that we've already started that or have completed those items. Currently, we are in the March-April section, and our goal is to get you a plan where there will be options very shortly or within the next month or two. Next slide, please. So we've been having regular meetings with SORTA. We had one on March 4th, and right before this meeting, we had another one. And basically what we've done is we've talked about some outstanding items. We've invited principals to come to share any concerns that they've had with congestion or times or safety regarding where the buses are stopping. And so some of the things that we've asked them to look at is increasing frequency of buses that come to Withrow in the morning from downtown, shifting the time for pickup at Schroeder by 5 minutes earlier, and then looking at some options for Euler School. So as we're discussing this with our transportation team and our transportation advisory group of principals and SORTA reps, we're trying to come up with some solutions. Some of these things we're just going to need the city to help us with. especially when it comes to street signs, crosswalks that are on city property. So we do have a list of things that we're going to be presenting to have the city go out and evaluate the situation and see if they can help us make it safer for our students to wait and for the bus. We also requested, moving forward, monthly reports that include that extra detail level of information that I mentioned earlier. So they are working on that, and from that I'll be able to do some data analysis to really see what the trends have been with students taking the bus, what times are they taking the bus. Right now, we no longer have the restricted cards where we did when we had the extra routes that they can only use the cards at certain times. Now with it being unrestricted, literally any time from 6 o'clock a.m. to, I believe, 6 o'clock p.m., they can use their cards. And technically, we shouldn't have kids using cards during the day because they should be at school during the day. So we're going to look at all that and analyze the situation. We have talked to SORTA about the possibility of for the students who take a transfer, because we do have students who just need one bus to get home. Is it possible to have the extra routes? And unfortunately, due to bus driver shortage this year, they're not able to accommodate that, not in the very near future. As I mentioned, we had our meeting just right before this meeting. And as Dan mentioned, we'll be looking at the contract, but as Board Member Bolton, I put that down that we won't do that until after you have the transportation plan. Okay. And just to let you know, I did email the board a recap of events that transpired this year between SORTA and CPS. And what I did was just by date, what happened, so that you have an easy digest to look at that instead of looking at volumes of materials. So moving forward, we're going to have another meeting with SORTA. I'm going to have another group of principals come on board to share their concerns. And as I mentioned before, we are putting together a list of items that we'd like the city to help us with. Next slide, please. So the unknowns. We still have a vacancy for Director of Transportation. We do have an interim director, but we need to have that position filled. We did contract with a company to do a national search for us. They've already started advertising. Another unknown is a big one. It's the House Bill 110 impact on transportation funding. So with that new law, ODE has made some changes in how they determine compliance. And one of the things that they've informed us is that they're no longer, charter schools and non-public schools are no longer having to comply with our existing processes for collecting information on students, eligible students who need transportation. It's been our process to have parents go onto our online registration system to let us know whether or not they want transportation, their addresses, proof that they are really the parent, and proof that they are really a resident in the district. The ODE has told us they don't have to do that anymore. They don't have to use our process. So we didn't know that until we received a complaint. Along with House Bill 110, there's a new process for charter schools and non-public schools to provide a complaint to ODE, and then ODE determines if there's any warrant to that complaint. And they look for prolonged and consistent period of time for non-compliance. And then they take funds away from us. And funds are based on the number of days they consider us to be non-compliant. And it could be one kid, it could be 1,000 kids. So how they determine as non-compliance is if for prolonged is if there were 10 consecutive school days of non-compliance, or consistent is if there was 10 days in any given semester. So when we got notice about non-compliant, we ODE had sent us a letter that came from one of the charter schools attorneys. Now, mind you, we had 3 non-compliant complaints, okay? 2 of them, ODE did not see any issues. But this one, the attorney for this charter school submitted a list of 187 names of students. And the transportation department went meticulously through each of those students to determine why they did not receive transportation. And as I mentioned before, we have a process, and this process has been in place for quite a while. Out of all those kids, ODE said that 41 of these students, 41 out of 184, did not, that we were not in compliance, 187, excuse me. And basically, those kids either, one, did not submit a request for transportation form, which was something that ODE actually had in their guidance prior to House Bill 110, that the parent had to notify us that they wanted transportation, and that was the way we did it, along with other school districts, that you submitted a request for transportation form. This is what that you want transportation. The other was that the parents or the school did not complete their online registration. So the reason why we'd have them do it on the online registration application is because that feeds into our student information system. That data then feeds into our transportation system and will automatically determine, based on how far you live, whether you are eligible for transportation or not. So with that said, the 41 students that they told us we were in non-compliance for every single one of them, we either did not get a transportation request or they did not finish what they were supposed to do as far as doing the online registration, which basically we can't determine what route, whether or not you qualify or anything without them providing that information. So it's still left to remain just exactly what information they can give us, or if we can even ask them for the information a certain way. I mean, we know that what we currently do, that ODE has told us, you can't make them do that. You can't make the charter schools or the non-pubs provide you that information in that manner. So since then, of course, this has been a heated discussion across the district, across the state, and various groups, including legal groups, have been meeting with ODE concerning their methodology for their method for how they're actually interpreting this law. So to date, unfortunately, ODE has withheld funds from several school districts: Columbus City Schools, Cincinnati Public Schools, Groveport Madison, Youngstown City, and Elyria School District. And the other unknown is just the cost of transportation. And as I mentioned before, when we're in the process of doing that optimization study. And from there, we will include that information in the business plan that will show option A, this is what's going to cost us, option B, and then from there, the board can decide which one they would like us to choose. Next slide, please. Yes.
Yeah.
Just
a quick pause. In talking with the treasurer, could we get Mike to come up and address the fine and the total amount of the fine?
I have that too. Yeah, I have it if you want me to.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so this is according to the settlement report.
Yeah.
The first payment for March. In the settlement report, it shows that our transportation annual amount is $12,189,281. Then the adjustments is when they either give you more money or take away from you. And the adjustment for transportation noncompliance was $2,641,010.84. Let me explain to you how they calculate that. They take our transportation annual amount, which was $12.2 million, divide that by 180 days, which means that our daily rate, whether it's one child or 1,000 children, is $67,718. They take that and then they multiplied it by 39 days, which is what they're saying we were non-compliant for, and that's how they came up with that $2.6 million. As I mentioned before, we're not the only one in this situation. Columbus was, they withheld $5.9 million from Columbus. And so this is a situation that, like I said, we're on high alert across the state because of the methodology that ODE is using.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
No,
This-
I think she covered it.
Go ahead. Yep.
No, I think she covered it. So
Great. Just for the public's sake, this is one more way that public schools that have been around for hundreds of years are being damaged based upon unfair rules and regulations and processes that favor the profit center of charters. And it's just one more way. There's been one strike after another, again and again and again. And this is outrageous that this happened kind of I won't say mid-year, but in the midst, you change the rules in the middle of what you're doing, let alone not insisting on us, insisting on the other folks that we have to provide the service for, being able to even tell us who's supposed to be transported. So, that's $2 million is a big hit. It's a very big hit. Mike, did you have something to add? Good? Okay, so that's an unknown. And supposedly we are finding a way that this won't happen to us again next year.
Yes, so we'll be talking to the charter schools and non-pubs. So the next step is determining a process by which they will agree to for how we're going to collect this information. As you know, thousands of students are provided with transportation, and we are praying that they're not just going to give us a written list, and we're going to have to need somebody to manually enter that information. So as I mentioned, the system we have in place, you have one person entering for one child or two children, right? So, and it's someone that they know. They put the information in there, and then that just feeds into other systems where the coding can automatically tell us, Johnny needs a ride. We're going to put him on this route. But with us not having that, if we have to manually enter, you could just imagine how much extra time that's going to take. And anytime you touch something manually, there's always room for error. So as I mentioned, we will be meeting with the non-pubs and charters because we want to give them the transportation that we're required to give them. But we're going to have to find a solution on the most efficient way to track that information.
We just watched this morning in policy where we had to kind of come up with a kind of a different platform and process regarding like the enrollment piece. So we know that we have in-house really wonderful people that can probably do that. But again, it's one more thing as we are going to be watching our transportation costs go significantly higher. Did you want to talk any more about the optimization plan, the transportation RFP?
Yes.
And the plan itself?
Yes. So the optimization study, this is for the yellow buses. We are actually in the process of doing those simulations now. We are using the notes from the 2021 Budget Finance and Growth Committee notes to inform what parameters are being used in that simulation. And then in order to respect the healthy start times for the high schools, the schools that are starting at 9:15, the algorithms in those simulations are going to use both 8:30 a.m. and 8:45 a.m. So what these algorithms do is they give us how many routes we actually need, how many bus drivers we actually need. And from there, where the goal is to be able to maximize the number of kids we can transport by yellow bus, but controlling our costs associated with that. We're also, the simulation is also including grades K through 8 on the yellow buses. The transportation RFP, that's been completed. We have chosen 6 transportation providers for next year. 2 of them are brand new Kemper shuttle services, a minority-owned company right here in the greater Cincinnati area. Hop, Skip, Drive we're actually breaking them into this market. They're all over the west and coast and east coast. They're also in some really good school districts like Colorado, Denver, Colorado, I believe. The others are existing partners, UTS, Peterman, First Student, and ALC. Just to let you know, vendor costs have all increased. Right now, this is the last year of their previous contract. We are getting ready to start a new contract with them. All their prices increased. Also, fuel costs have all increased as well. So when we put together that transportation plan, you will have in there the cost for each simulation. We will be as detailed as possible to let you know exactly what those costs are going to be, what grade levels, how many routes for each school that would consist of, grade levels being routed. We're also going to look at include costs for 9 to 12 at who live 1 miles or more from school, and also 1.25 miles, so that you can see both costs. And that's going to be for the metro. And then we're also going to look at costs associated with limiting transportation rides to 55 minutes, and then costs if we don't have that limit. Within the 55 miles, we will also look at, because we do have kids who take longer, what would be the option for them if we provided other services such as shuttle or hop, skip, drive to try to get them down to 55 minutes or not. So we will put all that together in that plan. Hopefully it will be comprehensive enough for you to make a informed decision. And then finally, we're also going to put in there costs for CPS bus fleet. And that would be for field trips, for clinical visits, for other school-related activities like instructional classroom trip visits or career trip visits. And then this way we will be able to better schedule the use of these buses, and that we have a higher probability of them being available when people need them.
That sounds great. Do members have some questions and comments? Mr. Morosky?
Just comment, a question, comment. Thank you so much, Ms. Solano. Again, I feel like I know what's going on with transportation for the first time since I've been on this board, quite frankly. And it feels really nice. The only question is just a request, actually. I was trying to dig up the document that you referenced that you did send us about the metro timeline or the conversations. Could you I can't find it. Could you just
I'll resend it.
Cool, thanks. That's all.
Craig.
And again, I think this is great information. I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us to reimagine how we're doing transportation within the district and ensure that the students are getting to school in a reasonable time, in a safe way. Additionally, kind of rethinking how some of the relationships that we've used SORTA for in the past. And so I think I appreciate you talking about that and whether or not we want to make adjustments based on what this plan tells us for students who live further away. I do know it's kind of a challenge in our district at times is that we have students who live so far away from where they're going to school. And, I think we're long-term thinking about how to fix that, but short-term, that is kind of the question. I did have one question just with regards to thinking about how we were doing with the yellow bus service more specifically for our students. And is the idea really to be maximizing which opportunities work best in this study for each school based on where the kids are? Is that kind of the idea with the yellow bus service for the K through 6 and the K through 8 idea? I don't know if that makes it, like, are we thinking about like which services, which routes, which paths will get the students to school and safe back from school in the same way we're thinking about it for the high school at Metro?
You mean as far as start times, or you mean as far as just getting them to school?
Getting them to school and back. Like, I know that's the challenge is that still there's a driver situation with yellow bus drivers as well.
Right. So in the simulation, the company tries to come up with student-friendly solutions. And so we give them parameters, like, you can't drop them off before 30 minutes. You got to pick them up before 30 minutes. of course, to comply with the law. And yes, we want to be able to put more kids on the bus, because if you notice, a lot of these buses are like half full. And we get charged for that bus, whether or not you got one kid on it or it's full. So it's a intricate balance of, as I mentioned, maximizing our offering while being able to control costs. And so we're hoping that after this simulation and you have all these different options, you can see, well, no, I can't live without that. I have to do that. Or yes, we can probably not do that. You know, that was a nice to have, but not necessarily a need to have. And then from there, based on what our limitations are as far as funding for transportation, hopefully you can find a solution that would best fit.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because the way I'm thinking about this also is I remember catching the yellow bus and catching it so early for where I was going to school at, but the route, in order to take up and pick up enough students, went this long roundabout way that didn't always necessarily maximize the speed there. I think the other thing is also just making sure that we get this done sooner, you know, so we can give parents enough time to also do their plan for their kids, to figure out how their kids are going to catch the bus, where that location is, so that we have a minimum amount of folks calling in, because I do know that that's what parents love to do when they don't have the situation ahead of them, right? They don't know the plan. They're going to reach out and ask. And so the more answers we have for them, the sooner, the better.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the update. Do we have, and stay with us because I think we're still doing buses a little bit. Do we have the treasurer?
Jen, go ahead and try.
Can you hear me?
What did our DJ
Hello?
say?
No. Not working.
Miss Bolton, we're probably going to have to restart this computer, so we'll have like a 30-second interruption to be able to bring Jen back in for the
Okay.
meeting. So do you want to keep going with this?
Yeah,
and
we'll
then-
keep going. The
Okay.
facilities update is very simple right now anyway. We've listed 3 things. You can, on the agenda, if you want to continue with that, that'd be great. Facilities update.
Next slide, please. So this too falls under optimized capabilities in our strategic plan. Next slide. And so what this table shows you is just an overview of costs, when we're expected to complete the projects, and a description of each one. And next slide, I'll go into more details on each project. So for the Walnut Hills, the current status is we're in progress on building that membrane structure that's going over the tennis court. This summer, we expect that to be completed. And in the fall, we're expecting to start construction on the classrooms and dining rooms, the additions. And then we're expecting that to be completed 2 years later in the summer of 2024. So the membrane structure is approximately 41,000 square feet. The classrooms and restrooms and offices, storage and workrooms, it's a 2-story addition at Walnut, and that's approximately 36,000 square feet. There's 2 outdoor spaces on the property that is going to be enclosed and converted to dining rooms, approximately 5,400 square feet, and then there's going to be some minor renovations to the existing faculty dining. So next slide for an overview of where this is happening. You can see the membrane. That's a conceptual picture of what it's going to look like. Below that is the location. You can see ground. They're already working on that. And then from an aerial view, it's right off of Jonathan Avenue. As you can see, the tennis courts will still be functional. We can still use that for tennis, but it also provides us with an opportunity to use it for other things as well. Next slide. Location of the classroom additions. You can see that it's going to be off of Pleasant View Avenue. And then where the dining additions are going to be is on Dulsar Street. Next project is the Pleasant Ridge Montessori School. Here's the timeline. We are currently in a design phase. This spring, we're expecting to submit an RFP and then from that secure a construction manager. We're expecting to start the project in the fall of 2022 and complete it 2 years later by the summer of 2024. So what are we adding? Additional classroom space. That's going to be another 21,000 square feet. We're converting the existing music room to a cafeteria, additional cafeteria space. We're converting the current art room to the music room. We're going to build a new play area for the preschool students. That's 10,300 square feet. And then we're going to reconfigure the parking lot to add 10 additional spots. So if we go to the next slide, you can see this is a conceptual drawing. Actually, I think it is to scale. You can see where the classrooms are going to be. It's on the left side of the property when you're looking from Montgomery Road. Where the new play area is going to be is behind the parking lot. And then you can see the small square is blown up into a bigger square. We are going to have an annex for the cafeteria where I don't know if you can see the corridor between where the existing cafeteria is and where the new cafeteria is going to be. That would be where the kids would transition from one to the other. Next slide, you see the 3 levels of additional classroom. The first floor will host the preschool and kindergartners. Second floor will host the 6 to 9. And the third floor will host the 9 to 12. The art room will be on the third floor. Each floor will also have intervention spaces, offices, and also restrooms. Next slide, please. So the Hyde Park project, our current status is the design documents are all complete, and they're in the process now of selecting a construction manager. Phase 1 is going to start in June. We're expecting phase 1 to be completed in July, and at that time, we're going to have the modular classrooms relocated to the new classrooms, and we're going to remove those modulars. Phase 2 will start in August of 23 with the goal of having that completed by July of 24. Phase 1 involves approximately 14,500 square feet, and that's additional classrooms and lunchroom and a renovation of existing space. And then phase 2 is approximately 6,200 square feet, and that's with the additional gymnasium space. So if we can go to the next slide. This is a conceptual drawing of our beautiful Hyde Park, what it's going to look like. I'm so excited. If we look from observatory, facing observatory, the front of the building, you can see on the very left side is where the additional classrooms would be, and in the back is where the gymnasium is going to be. I just want to mention that in the rear view, it's not on stilts. That's below grade. That's just to show the new foundation for it.
We already did a building on stilts in a flood plain some years ago as our first effort on the FMP, which remains a unique experience for spending public funds.
So the basement floor is going to have the cafeteria, kitchen, restroom addition, and then we'll also have some renovation of existing space. And if you go to the next slide, the first floor, you're going to see classrooms, additional classrooms with some renovations. And the second floor will have another layer of classrooms and some renovation. And that's all I have for the updates.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is the board will be glad to see this in the minutes. Appreciate it. Do you have anything else for us? Do we have our treasurer with us yet?
Ms. Bolton, we're going to go ahead and reset the system. So the room will be down for about 30 seconds. So
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, by all means. I was just trying to, oh, yes, because I have a couple too. Thank you for reminding me.
So just a quick question on the
outside the current building structure.
yeah, so the expansion out into the courtyard area.
Yeah, so, yes.
Okay.
It will not, it's not renovating existing building.
Okay. And then I think actually some of the designs look the same here for Hyde Park are really, and those are really great additions to the other schools. We'll try to do a lot of great things with a lot of students.
And I do want to mention that our project manager on this, Chairman is the one who provided me with a lot of this information. I guess the community was concerned because we have testing and they are going to work it out so that they're not drilling and making a lot of noise while kids are testing.
It's all great news. Obviously, we've been talking about these three projects for a long time. So my question is, one simple, I think. Is this all paid for? Do we have is this like, it feels like it's like a done thing. Mike is, no, not paid for, is it?
Yeah, Jim reminded me, they're not paid for yet.
Is any other thing, is any, have we identified dollars for?
There you go. That's the.
Yeah.
And the wellness paid for in tennis courts. The other things are pending budget approval.
Yeah, so what is everything, can all of, so the three items, can all of them be included in the budget?
Out of ESSER funding. So some of the planning for the renovations to the buildings are coming out of our ESSER funding.
Only, but some. So there are parts of this that have no money identified?
So that I don't know. Without
Okay.
I don't have the ESSER budget.
Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Just
Okay.
in time. Save the bell. Yeah.
So the Walnut Hills Dome, the Hyde Park, and the Pleasant Ridge Montessori projects are fully funded in ESSER, but the Walnut Hills expansion, the $13.5 million, is not. It was too big to fit into the grant. So we will either have to borrow money or do a PI levy in order to fund that. Either borrow money either through a bond or we can do another COPS issuance if we need to. But or as we revise the ESSER budget, if we can fit it in and find the room in it, then we can do that.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Thank you, Ms. Milano. Anybody else? I would add that these 3 or 4 items are only the beginning. There are a number of other things facilities-wise, whether it's something as simple as going back and starting a cycle of review of the buildings that already have been constructed as part of FMP, because the earliest ones are almost 20 years old. We have to take care of that, and we have some funding, I would assume, for some of that, but there's also property that probably needs to be sold. There's property that, like the Hughes Annex, that could answer a number of programmatic things that need to be done. So the treasurer is diligently seeking and getting the information that she needs to figure out how we might be doing this, because we've got lots of things to do. I would also add for Ms. Solano on this, when you're talking about facilities, it's not only optimization, But when you talk about facilities, this is about growth, that one of the other 5 items, because this is, it's really about growth. But this is a great report, and I really appreciate the fact that we actually have heard these with this kind of specificity. I think that's one of the things I've learned over these years. It really tell us as much as you can and know. And that keeps everybody in better shape. So thank you for the presentation. If we have the treasurer who is appearing from outer space today, apparently, if we can go just right through all the things that you would have to do. Is that possible? Starting with,
Yes,
we'll
ma'am.
come back to the buses, but let's start with the top of the list for you, which was new superintendent onboarding, or does that work? Or are you ready to do other stuff?
No, yeah, Rob, if you can bring my budget status PowerPoint up, please. So I just want to give you a really quick update. We can flip through these fairly quickly. So where do we stand during the building of the fiscal year 23 operating budget? First, I'll cover the schools. And so all the staffing and non-personnel are complete and are being loaded into our new budget software. And so just to remind you that all the staffing has been tagged to an identified tier, and reminding you of what those tiers are for now. Are Tier 1, the state and federal compliance. Tier 2 was anything that's required by the collective bargaining agreement. Tier 3 would be anything on top of that. And so we will be able to identify FTEs and dollars according to those tiers very shortly. The career tech budget allocations to the high schools are due back today, and so we will include those in our next report out. And then currently under review, we still have some open items. We're still going through the role of the school community coordinators and assistant school community coordinators, making sure that we're not duplicating efforts with our resource coordinator contract. And then there's a small list of items under programmatic cost that have yet to be funded. For example, the membership fees for the Montessori schools and new tech the TwoNet network membership fees. They're too big to come out of their regular operating budget, so we're working through those issues. Moving on to the centralized budget. Flip to the next, there you go. So the initial budgets are drafted. We are loading those into AlloView, and they're to be finished by March 31st, so we should be able to get a consolidated budget by then. We're confirming our benefit fringe rate, because if you recall, we are self-insured, and so we have to reevaluate how much we're charging our general ledger in each building, their fringe costs, based on estimates and actuals from the previous year. Then we are currently, the performance leadership team is currently reviewing the 3-year adopted ESSER plan and revising, because some things aren't spending out the way we'd anticipated. And so we have some money that we need to determine whether we need to repurpose it for something for this year or defer it till next year. Something like helping to fund the Walnut Hills expansion, or the increase in transportation costs due to COVID, and examples like that we didn't anticipate for next year. So we're working through those revisions, and then at our next public presentation we'll give you an update. Moving on. So what are our next steps? We received your board feedback on March 7th, and we're going to be working through those issues. Or those recommendations. I've been spending a few meetings with Superintendent Wright and helping her catch up to what our budget building process is. I've sent her all the documentations, and we are meeting again to go through some of our budget challenges, particularly around impact of some things that she might want to implement in her first year. Spoke with President Lindy about putting aside a superintendent contingency to give her a little bit of wiggle room. And we'll use unspent fiscal year 22 dollars to help fund that contingency for her. We are working through how do we close the gap, but I'm waiting for the load in AlloView to come up with what's the new value of the gap. And then Taya and her team are working through all the non-general fund budgets, and so we should be able to present those in a consolidated fashion fairly soon. And those are all the major grants, like Title I, IDEA B, Title IIA. And then I need to revise, based on this information in my next meeting with Superintendent Wright, we will republish a new budget timeline for engagements, which I'm sharing on the next slide. So the blue table is what was presented on February 28th as the intended timeline. That was prior to you announcing a new superintendent. And so we've had to pause a little bit, figure out where we stand. And we still intend to present at the district-wide LSDMC meeting on April 20th. And then we have 2 town halls scheduled. I think we can continue to host those. We're hoping to do something like the Mentimeter that we did with the board to get some public feedback and engagement. And then when I meet with Superintendent Wright next week, we'll work through some of the other opportunities for doing public presentations at board meetings. I've listed the other dates that we have board meetings scheduled, but I don't have any budget information on it. So we will hopefully present a new engagement timeline soon. Probably not Monday night, but the next meeting after that. So with that, do we have any questions? I think that was the last slide, yeah.
Any questions for the treasurer? I would only continue to say the community engagement that we engaged in for the superintendent search was as high quality as any engagement we've ever done here, to my knowledge. And I think an awful lot of the big questions have probably been answered in what as the community envisions the district, not just about what kind of superintendent, but they really were envisioning the kind of district that they wanted to see. And I think it would not be a bad idea to make sure we make great use of that, not only when we are starting our next strategic plan, but also in the budget piece. I don't think it's unreasonable to even start the budget engagement a little bit with at least some of the bigger pieces of.
I was thinking more in the lines of helping to inform the strategic plan moving forward rather than the current operating budget that we're in the midst of building.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I just think that there's, I think we ought to get the most out of whatever we've already done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that would be helpful. Any other questions, comments? All right. Any other alarms? Okay, then Jen, keep going.
Okay. Yeah, so Rob, can you bring up the levy options document, please? So you've seen this document before, but I did revise it based on new information from Brenda Weimer. Kind of discusses, you know, we have a levy that's on the ballot, will be on the ballot in November, assuming the board approves the resolutions. Are you seeing it? Because I'm not.
We're getting there.
Okay.
And I asked Jen to put this back on because I think it's important. I think, matter of fact, people have mentioned the last time we talked about the levy options, we wanted to try to make a decision or at least make a recommendation to the board before it got too late into spring. And certainly it's important to kind of, as we contemplate the budget too. Go ahead, Jen.
Right. Okay. So the levy that's coming up for renewal is a 5-year renewal. This will be the third renewal of $51.5 million. The current millage is at 7 mils. And so that 7 mils on a house of that has a market value of $100,000 will cost the taxpayer $247 a year. This was first enacted in 2008. So the significance of that enactment date gives us a little bit of freedom when considering a substitute levy. So here are your options. We could just do the same thing, renew it for 5 years for the same value. We can renew it for the same value, but up to 10 years with no negative impact to the homeowner. And then option 3 is you can renew it with a higher amount, and you can call it a renewal with an increase. I would not recommend, plus with today's economic situation, I don't think increasing a value would be wise. And then option 4 would be to use a substitute levy on this emergency renewal. and make it a continuing. The benefit of that is that because it was originally enacted but prior to 2013, it still keeps the benefit of the homestead and rollback credits to the homeowners. If it were a later levy, say the preschool levy, that last levy we did, and so even if you didn't change the value, the taxes to the homeowner would go up because it would lose those credits. We don't want that to happen. And so a substitute levy from 2008 will allow them to maintain those credits. And then we also, the 51 million annual revenue will increase based on the value of new construction. So it does have a positive benefit on district revenues. So those are the options. If this levy does not pass, the next forecast and the next budget will show $26 million of revenue loss for that year, for the fiscal year, because if you recall, property taxes are on a calendar year, and we operate on a fiscal year, so it would be half a year's value of that levy would be out of the budget, which could be very painful. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have to pass 2 resolutions. The first one is the board says that we do have a need for a levy, and then we send that to the Hamilton County auditor, and he rates it and validates the millage. And then the second levy, which I think is 100 days before the election, has to be approved, adopting the levy language. We send that to the Hamilton County Board of Elections and get an issue number. And so that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. So I'll pause there and let the Finance Committee discuss options.
Mr. Morosky?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Wagner. So for me, I'll just be quick. I think, either the 10-year or a substitute makes sense to me, and I think we could pass either, considering the Homeless Coalition will have a new charter amendment that's been a lot more collaborative than the last one regarding the affordable housing. They've included everybody and their brother, sister, cousin, whatnot. So my point is that our people who are amenable to our cause and agreeable to us will be out. Plus, every single county service just about is up on the ballot as well. So an increase is an insane idea for those reasons, but also for those reasons, I feel like changing it now is a good idea because I think we have a good chance of passage. Because again, I think our people will be out in droves for those other levies.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Mr. Craig?
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. I think one of the I shouldn't say concern, but one of the things I think in doing either option, whether it is expanding to that 10-year or doing the substitute, is that we need to make sure that we are informing on that in a way that appreciates the need to demonstrate we've done a good marshaling of these dollars as a district, right? That this is a positive thing for folks to understand and recognize that this is not because what happens is we do the marketing separate of this idea rather than kind of connecting up this idea that the district has done well. We're continuing to marshal these good resources to benefit, and this is what we need. So I think no matter what we end up going with, which I probably would lean towards the substitute of any of the options, just because, again, I think we've been so long since we initially passed the first one there, since I was still in law school. It's building in some of the modifications, or building in an opportunity to do the substitute is a great way to also, again, revamp our messaging around how school levies work.
Thank you. I would add that it'll pass if the community likes the new superintendent and if we can make the buses run on time. If we don't do those 2 things, the thing's not going to pass in this climate. And I have a personal affection for this particular levy because it was, I think, a 3-4 vote that it even got on the ballot, and it was only because there was a major change in the election of the board that year, similar to what we've just had now, that many people changing, or seats changing. I worry about the continuing because I still think that people ought to have a right to choose on fairly regularly as to whether or not they want to give their money to us. But y'all have won me over on the 10-year thing. And so I'd sort of be there, but I think we maybe have one more discussion as a committee, and then is the timeline okay for us to not necessarily present a recommendation until April to a board meeting, or is that give us enough time for the two resolutions?
Yes, that gives us plenty of time.
Great.
It only takes a county auditor like 10 days, I think, to turn his data around. So we're well in advance of needing to do this.
Super. If that's good for everybody, I just would like to go back to two items in particular. I'm thrilled to hear that we're, continuing to revise and rethink the ESSER dollars. And certainly part of my interest is the facilities piece and the improvement and whatever we are allowed to do. I think that's great. And then also on the bus, the dedicated fleet, if Ms. Solano, if I check my notes right, we had talked about the possible van, but you're kind of upbeat on the additional vendors for vans, at least, and that we might be able to meet our needs.
Yeah, because the two additional vendors, one is Hop Skip Drive, and they will have folks to be able to pick up our students who are being served through JFS or McKinney-Vento students. And then also the Kemper Shuttle Company has both buses and vans. So we've added, and that was our biggest needs, is to have vehicles that can handle single-digit number of students, right? So and then with Hop, Skip, and Drive, as you can imagine, they'll have quite a number of vehicles ready to help us with transporting our students.
So then we might be thinking in terms of that dedicated fleet being more of the yellow bus kind of thing, if we could possibly do that. My question on that, of course, is you're going to be putting some data together as to how we are currently, what is the usage of the quasi-dedicated fleet that the vendors own and we rent or lease or whatever or pay for?
Yeah, so we're in the process of collecting data from our from the Bus Hive application, which is the portal that schools use to share their need for a bus. How many, for how many kids, what day, what times, and then the bus vendors can reply and say, yeah, well, we can handle that. So I'm looking at that data to see, usage, frequency, how many students were served, how many times they were used, and then also we'll be reaching out to athletics to ask them for that information as well.
Great.
And then look at the current costs that we're spending for those now.
Good. And then, Jen, you're looking into costs of buses and stuff and order and delay or whatever? Is that my recollection of our conversation?
Yeah, so the vendor to buy from is Bluebird, I believe. And I think they have like a 6-month lag time, and Connie, correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm working with Brenda to figure out how to fund them if we were to do a purchase. Because we don't have the room in our operating budget to purchase.
Right. And then could we get a report back at our April meeting about the bus, the information, or before? That would be great. Any other questions about that? All right, we have very quick ones now that we go through. Help me out if you would, Madam Treasurer. I think we have a couple of committees we have to talk about.
All right, so the board needs to formally appoint a representative to the Hamilton County Tax Incentive Review Council. Just need to do a name and adopt it at a board meeting to represent the district at their meetings when they review the tax abatement agreements to make sure everybody is in compliance, and if not, what to do about it. The meeting is typically the last couple days of June, and I do not go because it's in the midst of our year-end close. So we typically have Ken Dietz or DeMuzio go on our behalf, but the board usually appoints somebody at a public board meeting, right? Usually during an organizational meeting, but I don't think you did that this year.
Right. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a board member. It can be somebody that we are paying to be there, right? That has the expertise, or
That's correct.
do you have a recommendation so that we could send that forward?
I would say either me or Dan Hoying, because it's usually either one of our attorneys that are contracted with us, or one of our employees usually goes too. So
Let's send Stephanie. Stephanie work for all of us? That's great. Would that work? We have a wonderful associate general counsel. We'll see if she can possibly do that. Committee okay with that, since Mr. Morosky said, okay, all right. And then we also have the ad hoc. Would you please update us on the ad hoc committee, since it seems like the membership is expanding significantly, and it speaks to what we talked about in the previous committee in policy, and in this one about a better relationship and partnership with the city. Tell us what we do now.
So the assignment came from the last finance committee, and it was related to concerns around the new process the city council is adopting regarding approving the Community Reinvestment Act agreements. And so I reached out to Greg Landsman. We've had a couple conversations. We each have identified interested parties, and he is coordinating a meeting to get together so that everybody is on the same level, so to speak, in our understanding, and then we can talk about whatever concerns and issues moving forward. He's very agreeable to coordinating that for us.
Great. And it would be both administration would be on this committee, because it is with the city, and then also at least a couple of board members? Not more?
My understanding is the three of you were interested in participating, and then some from people from my staff. And then I'd like to invite Dan Hoying, since I understand that their attorney, Billy, will be joining their side.
Finance, should we practice what we preach?
I'm all about it. Nobody told me when I got on this committee that it came with like 16 other committee assignments. So I was told about audit, but everything else I was lied to about. But yeah, I'm into it.
Pal around with the other city manager. And,
I don't get enough of that. Yeah,
I believe.
Enough of that.
I believe our chair hid this information from us to get us on, but
hey,
that's fine.
We're good. Okay, we'll do it. So put all three of our names, and we'll have to notice the meeting, I guess, as a finance meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And are you the contact person, Jen, so that you can be informing us as to when this happiness begins?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Does anybody in the administration have anything else to add to this meeting as we are getting ready to conclude?
Not for me.
All right, board members, any other business, new business, old business, plans for the weekend, whatever?
Ms. Bolton, we do have one speaker this evening.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Okay. We're anxious to hear what they have. Oh, it's Craig, for God's sake.
Craig Rosen on levy options.
In person, and I knew that. I forgot, though, I'll tell you. I won't tell you how long I've known Craig.
Good afternoon.
One of my kids.
Good afternoon, Board, Chair Bolton, the staff, those watching. My name is Craig Rosen. I've been active in the district for over a decade, supporting the levy and championing the district's initiatives. I am here to humbly thank you for having these levy discussions earlier than we've had in years past. But I do want to remind the district why the last levy was made for a 10-year term and not to a continuing. And that is, we've seen in this city that, as Chair Bolton had mentioned, many people prefer to have some oversight on their monies and their dollars as they vote for them. By moving to a continuing levy, the last time that happened, it did not pass. I believe that was 2011. I believe going to option 4 to be a very concerning opportunity for the district, yet we saw in the last levy cycle that moving to a 10-year term instead of the 5-year term passed. My hope would be is that we could, as a district, finalize these discussions sooner so that we can then submit the appropriate paperwork to be approved and filed so that levy engagement can happen at a much earlier time, especially this year where we don't have as much going on as far as city council and school board. There's going to be a lot of competition out there for levy dollars. I'm proud of CPS, and I want to make sure that CPS holds that position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen. Appreciate your comments. We good? I think we can now adjourn and had a very good meeting, 2 good meetings. Big stuff, big stuff. Everybody have a great weekend and the rest of March. Let it go.